What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 64 of the Halving Report podcast with myself, your host, Brad Mines. The price of Bitcoin is approximately 30,000 US dollars, and there's about 24 months left until the next Bitcoin halving. Today, we welcome the co-host of SimplyBitcoinTv, Nico at Bitbolt7 on Twitter, onto the show. Nico is a self-described Bitcoin taco pleb. If you don't know what that is, I invite you to listen right to the end of the episode to find out and hear some bold takes on Bitcoin, quote-unquote shitcoins, and everything else that is happening in the space right now. So let's get right to it.
Nico, thanks for coming on to the Halving Report podcast today.
Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first thing I want to ask you, man, is, maybe you can give us an introduction for yourself for listeners who may not know who you are and what you do in the Bitcoin space.
Hey guys, I'm Nico. I've been in the space for roughly 6 years now. I'm class of 2016. Just enjoying the Bitcoin roller coaster. I have a hosting company. I host Bitcoin miners. I do a little bit of mining myself. I also have it's well known in the community. It's a Bitcoin show. It's called Simply Bitcoin. We cover the daily news. We'll cover memes, and we'll cover the catastrophic fails from the shitcoiners, man. Blessed. I work in Bitcoin. I can't ask for anything more, man.
Yeah, you guys have some interesting shows. You guys are pure maxis, right?
Yeah, Bitcoin only for sure.
Yeah.
Shitcoins are a scam. They're meant to steal your Bitcoin. If you haven't learned that yet, probably haven't been through a cycle yet, or you're the founder of a shitcoin. So, that's kind of how it is, right?
Absolutely. And so what did you do before you fell into the Bitcoin space?
So I fell into the space pretty young. So I don't come from, most of my professional career has been in Bitcoin, but before that I worked in commercial real estate. And before that, I worked at a couple companies here and there. Had some shitty jobs, and because of those shitty jobs, that kind of gave me the incentive, because I didn't like where I was, to go into Bitcoin.
Sweet, man. And what was it like? How did you first come across Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like I said, I kind of, I worked some shitty jobs, man. And, I was working a minimum wage job. I was living on my friend's couch, and I was just desperate to get out of that situation. And I had a cousin that came to visit me from Venezuela, and he basically told me about, he's like, hey, have you ever heard of Bitcoin mining? I was like, no, I don't know what that is. And I saw that as an opportunity. To be honest with you, I just saw it as an opportunity to get out of my situation. I dropped everything I had, quit my job, borrowed money from my mom, borrowed money from my ex-girlfriend, put it all into Bitcoin, and never looked back.
So you're a coach surfing pleb, now gone full Bitcoiner. I know what a pleb is, but what's a taco pleb?
Oh man, that's a very good question. So taco plebs are really, I don't know if I could answer this, but really hardcore maxis. It was originally created as a joke, because there was kind of this influencer circle in Bitcoin, and the taco plebs are, I would say, we're the ones that just don't give a fuck. We don't care about the influence, we don't care about the clout. We just stay true to Bitcoin, and you kind of you get awarded the taco pleb thing, right? It's given to you. It's not something that you just, anyone could put it on, but people know who the real taco plebs are, and that's something that we embrace, and represents who we are. But at the same time, it's really not meant to be understood either. It's something that if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. But just to make it simple for your listeners, I guess it could represent the most hardcore maxis that just don't care about the whole influencer circle jerk. We care about Bitcoin. We care about the Bitcoin revolution. We care about tearing down the tyranny of central banking. And that's the only thing we care about. Like, we just don't care about, follower count or any of that bullshit that a lot of people do care about, right? So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, I find it's a lot easier to get, likes and clicks when you're talking about altcoins, right? It just seems to hit a nerve whether you're on Twitter or Instagram, and you see all the blatant scammers. There's so many on Twitter. Are you pretty active on Twitter? Like, what do you think about the whole Elon Musk acquisition? Bless you.
Thank you. Honestly, I don't. I think that it doesn't. I think it's a band aid to a solution, to a problem. I don't think it's going to fix the problem. The problem is that if something can be censored, if it can be controlled, it will be. That's what makes Bitcoin unique, and that's what sets it apart from the shitcoins. The shitcoins are inherently centralized. They're controlled by a foundation or a CEO or a group of people, and therefore that group of people can manipulate the network in order to benefit themselves. Now, if you apply that to a social network, same principles apply. The people that control that social network are going to censor for their benefit, right? A monetary network is very similar. The people that control that monetary network are going to be able to manipulate the monetary policy for their benefit. That's what makes Bitcoin unique. Bitcoin, it has figured out, Satoshi figured out how to successfully separate the monetary policy out of the hands of humans through proof of work. And the issue with Twitter, even if Elon manages, because he hasn't acquired yet, right? He's in the process of acquiring yet. It still has to go through a bunch of paperwork. That's going to take about 6 months to a year, right? But if he does do it, essentially, instead of being beholden to left-wing, technocrats in Silicon Valley, you're going to be beholden to a libertarian billionaire, right? So, he says he's for freedom of speech, but what is freedom of speech to him? Because freedom of speech means different things to different people. The Twitter issue won't be solved until the network is successfully taken out of the hands of humans. I don't know if it can, right? I know that the only thing that has been able to figure that out through decentralization and proof of work is Bitcoin. So does it fix the fundamental problem? No. Could he make it better? Yes. But it's still vulnerable to be captured by human beings. The problem is, right, is, it's the old age saying, right, is absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And how it's happened to money, how it happened to fiat, how it happens with shitcoins, right, is there's a leader, there's a human being at the top of that, right? He has all this power because he gets to decide, what do I want to make the monetary policy? What do I want to make the speech policy for my social network, right? And what tends to happen is that even with the best intentions, over time, as more political pressure mounts up, the network becomes corrupted. Only Bitcoin has been able to successfully solve that problem, right? So I guess it's good news. We shall see.
Do you think there's different levels of decentralization between altcoins? Does any of them come close to that aspect of Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, nothing comes close to Bitcoin in terms of decentralization. If you really look behind the hood, you'll start to realize what it is. Now, look, at the end of the day, I'm a libertarian, right? If you want to hold shitcoins because it makes you happy, go for it. Just understand you're not holding a store of value, right? It's not a store of value. It's a shitcoin, and you're hoping that shitcoin outperforms Bitcoin so that you can get more Bitcoin yourself. From experience and what I've seen happen to people is you're much better off just buying, dollar cost averaging, getting a good paying job, and putting as much of that into Bitcoin. You wait. It takes about 4 years to get comfortable. It takes about 8 years to get somewhat wealthy compared to where you started, right? Wealth is relative, right? So, now, in terms of your original question in decentralization, no. If you look at Ethereum, right, which is the second most popular cryptocurrency, it's transitioning to a proof of stake system, which has all these problems. It's not feasible, which is why they haven't been able to make the transition. They're still on a proof of work system. And if you compare the amount of computational power backing up Ethereum, it doesn't even come close to Bitcoin. Now, even make it worse, because Ethereum is so resource intensive, the Ethereum nodes are they're inherently centralized, right? It's estimated that 60 to 70% of Ethereum nodes run on a cloud server, which is just a very fancy way of saying someone else's computer. What makes Bitcoin unique is the node network, and the node network, because they're so they don't require a lot of resources. It only costs around $300 to build yourself own Bitcoin node. You can even run a Bitcoin node on an old computer, right? Try doing that with an Ethereum node. It's very expensive. XRP is even worse. You have to be approved by the XRP Foundation, of which they own the majority of the nodes, right? You have to get approved by the Ripple guys to run a version of Ripple, right? The whole thing, and not to mention they own around 70% of the pre-mine. So you just go down the list and you could point out centralization. Could you point out a CEO of Bitcoin? There is none. Could you point out a CEO of Ethereum? Vitalik snaps his finger, Ethereum changes. Brad Garlinghouse, which is, you know, basically the CEO of Ripple, right? There's a metaphorical head to chop off if a government decided to clamp down. What makes Bitcoin unique is if a government wanted to get involved, there is no one to go after. That's what makes it special. If we want to separate money from state, that is the only way to do it.
Interesting. So then if, say, Satoshi suddenly reappeared to the Bitcoin community and everybody knew who he was and he had this massive influence, would that change things?
So I look, in my opinion, it's not important who Satoshi is. I think it's even better if Satoshi just stayed disappeared. In my opinion, he's either dead or he understands the concept that I explained to you. I think as a community, we have a pretty good idea of who it could be. And that person or those individuals, right? Because it could be a group of people. If you look into their backgrounds of the people that it could be, they're hardcore cypherpunks. So what I just explained to you, right? This concept of separating money from state, because there's something that Bitcoiners understand that shitcoiners don't. Shitcoiners don't understand that this protocol, this movement is bigger than any one human being. And if we are to be successful, it has to be decentralized. So because if there is one person to jail or to essentially get rid of or to arrest or to put on trial, the whole movement stops, right? And that's something that Ethereum, XRP, and a lot of these other shitcoins suffer from. There is someone to jail. There's someone to capture. With Bitcoin, you could put 5, 10, 20 of us in jail. More will pop up like a hydra, right? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nico. Let's talk about what's happening right now. Like we were saying before the pre-roll, we're watching Bitcoin collapse as well as other markets. You know, what's going on right now? Are we in a full-fledged bear market? Has Bitcoin underperformed in this past cycle? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So let's kind of break it down. Has it underperformed? Yeah, I think a lot of people had higher expectations. I think a lot of people were hoping for 100K. I think myself included. I don't speculate on my show. I don't call out for any price. I think it's very irresponsible. I like to focus on the revolution. And I encourage people to just stack, right? Just every day, buy a little bit of Bitcoin, forget about it, hold on to it for a minimum of 4 years, right? That's what I encourage everyone. That's what I tell everyone. And that's advice that I follow myself, right? Now, in terms of the underperformance, yeah, there was the Chinese Communist Party banned Bitcoin mining within its borders. And that coincidentally happened right in the beginning of the Bitcoin pump. So right when they banned Bitcoin mining within its borders, the hash rate, which means the amount of computational power actively mining Bitcoin, right, the amount of ASICs that are actively mining Bitcoin, dropped by 50%. And that caused the largest difficulty adjustment in Bitcoin's history, 27.9%. So just to kind of give you an understanding of what happened, and I believe that took the wind out of the sails of the market. Now, what I hoped is that it delayed the bull market. So instead of in 2021, 100K Bitcoin, it came in 2022. It looks like that's not going to be the case. So yeah, I think it underwhelmed a lot of people. I think people were expecting, melt facing gains at higher prices. Unfortunately, that I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, in terms of why is the price dropping, so in the West and the United States, we printed a record amount of money in the last 5 years. That's just the reality of it. We started this QE, or the Fed, better said, started this this QE experiment at 2008 to get out of the financial crisis, and because of COVID, because of the virus, and they didn't want the economy to hurt, and not to mention the lockdowns, which I think were catastrophic by governments to the economy. The government decided, hey, we could just print ourselves out of this mess. That's what they did. And now we're starting to suffer the consequences. Record inflation. We haven't seen this inflation in the United States specifically for more than 40 years. What does the Fed do? The Fed really has a blunt instrument. Their only other option is... Wait, sorry about that. Getting a call. Their only other option is to raise rates. And essentially what that is, it just makes it more expensive to borrow money. And how that functions in the economy is it freezes the economy. It slows it down. That's a very dangerous tool because they could overdo it and they could make the U.S. go into recession. I believe that's going to be the case. But the Fed started raising rates about 2-3 weeks ago. So they made it more expensive to borrow money, and they also said that they were going to start unloading their balance sheet, right? Which is just a fancy way of saying that they're not going to continue printing money. So yeah, and that essentially caused turmoil in the markets. The Nasdaq dropped, the stock market dropped. Netflix, I think, is down more than 50%. It's fucking crazy. Coinbase is getting slaughtered. So things are just getting destroyed, and Bitcoin's directly correlated to the Nasdaq. So it's just following that. Now, here's the $1 million question. Could the Fed keep up this hawkish behavior? In my opinion, they're going to want to turn on the money printer in maybe a month, maybe 2 months, because this is extremely damaging to the Biden administration. They look terrible right now. This is the only thing that propaganda can't save. Because no matter how much propaganda you use, at the end of the day, someone to go buy milk is looking at that sticker price and they're like, holy shit, that's very expensive. And no matter what the person on TV tells you, you're just looking at that price and you're like, I don't care what you have to say. This looks very expensive. So very bad, very damaging politically. This is going to hurt them in the elections. They know that. So yeah, this is just a shitty situation. And this was all caused because they printed a F ton of money, which they don't have. And if you look at, some of Satoshi's original work, and even in the Genesis block, the first block of Bitcoin, it literally says Chancellor on the second bailout for banks, right? It literally says that in the Genesis block. And he wrote in some of his writings, right, the main problems from central banking is the fact that you have to trust the central bank not to debase the money. Wow, did he know the future? He knew this was coming, right? So I think this is one of the things that Bitcoin fixes this, but they don't call it the Bitcoin roller coaster for nothing.
What do you think about nation state adoption? I think we just saw the second nation, Central African Republic, is it, that adopted Bitcoin as legal tender, like El Salvador. Well, what do you think about that? And do you see more nation states adopting in the near future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that we're kind of experiencing this decentralized revolution. It's beautiful. We're witnessing it before our eyes. Now, the difference is that usually when there's a tech innovation, it happens either in Europe, in China, in the United States. But because those countries benefit from the legacy financial system, they have the most to lose if something like Bitcoin wins. So what I suspect is going to happen, and that's exactly what is happening, is it's going to be a bottom-up revolution. So countries that least benefit from the legacy financial system, like El Salvador, which happens to be a very poor country, like the Central African Republic, which also happens to be a very poor country, like the Kingdom of Tonga, right? We had a representative from that island come on the show, and he says, we would absolutely like to make Bitcoin legal tender. And it's not rocket science why these people would like to. Their monetary policy isn't directly controlled by them. They don't have the power of the money printer. So what are they doing? They're trying to take back some of their financial sovereignty, and Bitcoin is a tool for them to do so.
Now, I've seen you talk about Nodl and running your own node and how important that is. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how maybe running your own node improves Bitcoin transaction privacy.
Yeah, so very simple way to explain it, right? If you are checking your Bitcoin balance, or let's say you're sending a transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to send that through a Bitcoin node, right? If you're not using your own node to check your transaction, to check your, your balance, right? And it's not that hard. You could sync your Blue wallet or any Bitcoin wallet, and some of them give you the functionality to sync with your node. So if you're broadcasting a transaction or you're checking your balance, you're not doxing or you're not exposing your address information to an unknown person. You're relying on your own hardware in order to check that stuff. Now, BTZ Sessions, buddy of mine, he makes some awesome tutorials on how to build your own. You could buy a Raspberry. You buy very cheap hardware. You could build it yourself. It won't cost you more than $200-$300. And it's not difficult to do. If you're too lazy to do that, definitely go check out nodl.eu. They make some awesome nodes. I really recommend them. And you could build it. I think the prices are between $500 to $800, and they make some very high quality stuff. There's also some features in there. It's made of metal. It's really good stuff. I think that there's levels of becoming a Bitcoiner, to becoming sovereign. Right. The first step is buying Bitcoin, and the second step is taking that Bitcoin into self-custody. So taking possession of your own keys. And then the third step really is to run your own node. Right. So I think that's really, you should start 1, 2, 3. You shouldn't try to skip and do things. So you kind of need a conceptual understanding of what is Bitcoin, how does it work, so that you can get from A to B.
And you're a supporter of Lightning Network. Maybe you can tell us what is Lightning Network and where should people get started there?
Yeah, so pretty good. I'm not a technical guy. I cover, geopolitical events. We cover Bitcoin culture, but I'll try to explain it in the non-technical way. So the Bitcoin main chain is limited, right? A lot of the shitcoin narratives is like, oh, it's so slow, it's whatever. That's a feature, not a bug. But the main chain is met with decentralization above all. Because it's decentralized, it's what I told you about Ethereum earlier on in the recording. Ethereum, it's faster, it's quicker, it has more functionality, but because of that, it's more resource intensive. Because it's more resource intensive, it requires more expensive hardware. Because it requires more intensive hardware, it ends up becoming centralized because there's only a certain amount of people that could do that. Because Bitcoin puts decentralization above all, the base layer, the main chain, has to be as simple as possible so that it doesn't overwhelm people's hardware, so it's not too expensive. Because of that, the main chain is limited to how many transactions per second it could have, meaning it would be almost impossible for it to be a global monetary network because it's limited, right? There's only so many transactions that could fit in a block, and the block happens to be every 10 minutes, right? If you look at Visa, there's like, it's crazy. It's like 25,000 transactions per second. It's some crazy number, right? So this is where the Lightning Network come in. Now, the Lightning Network is really interesting because it uses something called a sidechain. It's a second layer. And essentially how it works is, think about a bar tab, right? So you open a channel, and when you open a channel, that's one transaction. So that one transaction gets broadcasted to the Bitcoin network, right? It takes about 10 minutes. Maybe if you do slow fees, it takes about an hour, right? That opens the bar tab. That opens the channel, right? And essentially how Lightning works is, now me and you could transact, right? We go back and forth. Here, I'll send you 100, you send me 100. But none of those transactions get broadcasted to Bitcoin, the main chain. It only gets broadcasted when we close the bar tab. So, and I could also take care of someone else's bar tab, right? So that kind of serves the functionality where we could have basically an unlimited amount of transactions because it's not happening on the first layer. And when we decide to close out the channel or close out the bar tab, then that's another transaction that goes into the main chain. So think about it. There could have been hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of transactions, and the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, only sees two: opening the channel and closing the channel. I hope I explained it, because it is kind of complicated.
That is, that sounds really pretty clear. And if I'm not mistaken, Satoshi had alluded to this sort of service in his early writings. I'm not sure if you know anything about that, or
I don't, but
okay.
I know, like a lot of the forum.org talk, for bitcoinforum.org or something like that, bitcointalk.org or something. I know that he mentioned, or maybe it was Hal, but I think it was Hal that mentioned that the Bitcoin base layer, it was going to get to a point where it was only going to be used by big players. I believe that as well. I think that right now, roughly a Bitcoin transaction costs maybe 20 cents to $1. Next cycle, it's going to be $10 minimum transaction, or maybe $1 minimum transaction. So the smaller transactions start to not make that much sense anymore. That's where Lightning really plays in. I think that we're seeing the beginning of Lightning. It's really not that old. Came about really 2017, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I think that by the time the next cycle comes around, 2024, 2025, I think we're all going to be we're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Now, you're very anti altcoin. What would you say was more toxic to you? Somebody that kind of denies and puts down the whole entire Bitcoin and cryptocurrency ecosystem, or someone that is promoting an altcoin?
Yeah, so altcoins are an attack on Bitcoin. For an altcoin to succeed, it's basically attacking Bitcoin, and shitcoins don't mind stabbing Bitcoin in the back if it means enriching themselves, right? We've seen the recent social attack by Brad Garlinghouse. We also know for a fact that the Ethereum Foundation is behind a lot of the environmental attacks on Bitcoin, and they're actively pushing for proof of stake. So it's not a coincidence that the two most popular altcoins are social attacking Bitcoin, because they know they can't compete with Bitcoin because of Bitcoin's proof of work. Therefore, they have to resort to a social attack. Now, what's disgusting about that is that we have a chance as the human race to essentially create a new system, a system that is not exclusive like the central banking system, like political money, and we have a chance to separate money from state. None of these altcoins will be able to do that. They will not be able to successfully resist government attacks. So what they've realized is, hey, let's get into bed with these people, right? So yeah, and I always I'm not like, a lot of maxis are very insane, and they're like intense. So like, bro, listen, I'm a libertarian. You want to hold shit coins, so be it. Just, I always let you know what you're holding. And here's the other thing, right? If it's your first year in Bitcoin, if it's your second year in Bitcoin, and you're dabbling your toes in shit coins because you don't know better, you just don't know better. Now, if you've been here for 5-6 years, and because you'll know, right? And you're still peddling shitcoins to people, dude, like, I start to believe that you're being malicious. And I would suspect that it's a very small minority of people that are malicious, but those people hurt a lot of people financially, because it really is as easy as taking the long time preference, stacking, working your job. It's not a get rich quick scheme, right? Saving in Bitcoin takes about 4 years minimum to be comfortable, where you look back and you're like, that was a good idea. It takes about 8 years to become wealthy, where you look back and you're like, I have a lot of money, or like, I have a lot of money relative to where I started. So I hope that answers your question.
Did you ever go through a phase?
Oh, I mean, so kind of. Because I got a little bit lucky, because I got into Bitcoin through Bitcoin mining. So I always had appreciation of the hash rate. But to answer your question, did I hold shitcoins? Absolutely, man. Of course. Yeah. You all kind of have to go through an experimentation phase. And then the more time you stay in Bitcoin, the more you learn about Bitcoin, is the more you realize that it's unique and it's special. And at that point, it becomes an ethical issue, because you realize that, look, at the end of the day, let's say you're trading a shitcoin, there's someone else on the end of that losing trade, and that person would have more Bitcoin today if it wasn't for me So for that reason, I don't. I haven't for a couple years now.
Do you have any favorite books or podcasts in the space?
Look, I make Bitcoin content, so I the last thing that I want to do is listen to more Bitcoin content. So if I had a couple podcast like favorite podcasts, I would just give a shout out to the person that originally orange pilled me. He became a little bit of a shitcoiner later on, but this guy was a legend for a long time. His name is Andreas Antonopoulos. Now, in terms of books, I would definitely recommend The Sovereign Individual. I think it's a must read. It will kind of give you a perspective of why there's so much chaos, where we're going, what this technology is going to enable you to do. I think that we're entering an era that is uncharted. We've never experienced something like this, and it's quite simple. We've never lived in a system where an individual has been able to transact and, you know, live freely and travel without running into the government, without running into the state. Bitcoin gives them their ability. Let me give you an example, because it's hard to explain. So right now, there's a law that if you're entering the United States or if you're leaving and you're going into Europe, most countries, they have a $10,000 cap on the amount of fiat that you could enter and leave the country with. So if you're entering into the United States and you have more than $10,000 in cash, the customs will ask you. Of course, you know, you could always get lucky, right? And just they won't check you. But if they do check you, they're going to take that cash. Now, translate this to refugees, right? You're refugees, you're leaving the country, you want to take all of your wealth with you. Obviously, you can't take your property with you, but what do? You take some form of money, gold, or whatever it is, right? If they catch you at that border, they will literally steal it from you, right? Now, here comes Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you can memorize a 12 or 24 word seed phrase, and you could store that wealth in your mind. If you're really under pressure, you will for sure memorize 24 words. So it changes the balance of power completely from the state, from the government to the individual. And we've never lived in a world where that was the case. So I have no idea what's going to happen. But I'll tell you this. What I've seen it do to my life, what I've seen it do to other people's lives, it changes them. They become optimistic about the future. Obviously they do, because now all of a sudden their money isn't stealing from them, right? So I really believe that's going to make the world a better place, but let's see.
I tend to agree with you. Bitcoin's given me so much hope. I was had a doom and gloom outlook on things before getting into the realm of Bitcoin. And now it's just excited me in so much, you know, that I spend so much time in the space, just like you, talking to people and trying to absorb as much as possibly can. Nico, I'm going to open it up for you. If you have any final words of wisdom or comments, or if not, maybe just tell us where we can follow you and learn more.
Yeah, we are at the beginning of, and maybe not, but I think this is where you're going to earn your stripes. This is where you have to hodl. This is the greatest opportunity. This is where you're going to be able to stack some cheap sats. So stack. Don't stop believing. If you feel insecure, I'll just listen to more Bitcoin content that just tells me that you don't understand. So just keep stacking. Now, in terms of where you could follow me, you can follow me on Twitter, bitvolt7. And you could, check out my show. It's called Simply Bitcoin. You can follow us on Simply Bitcoin on YouTube or at SimplyBitcoinTv on Twitter. We post Monday through Saturday at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Awesome, Nico. Thanks again for joining me today and enlightening myself and my listeners. I will be in touch.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to the Halving Report podcast. Please like and subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, check out our show notes below for more about our guests and some sweet crypto coupons, and we'll see you back next time.